Excellent. So we agreed that I'll have 2 minutes for the sales side of things, and then we're going to talk about the real stuff. So I saw there was a tendency on this to separate the commercial side of things. Yeah, so again, thank you for having us here. Super excited to talk about our partnership, and we do truly believe that there's a lot of things that we can do together, and we are already showing a few things that are happening. So, Ari, I'm heading partner team at Aiven, and yeah, so Julien thought that it's a good intro to say that I like nature and lake. So if you take the next slide, this is actually from my summer cottage, so that's where my soul sort of gets relaxed. I truly believe that. But the next, so a little bit of Aiven. So Aiven is originally from Helsinki, Finland, founded 2016. 4 guys that used to work together on a large-scale infrastructure consulting, and before that 3 of them worked in a cybersecurity company together, and then they were trying to figure out a way to actually productize their skills. And as we all know, consulting is quite hard to really replicate people. So they thought about, okay, let's start to think about product-based approach on this. 2015-16, they were looking for the first round of investment, and everybody said that this is the stupidest idea that I've ever heard. You know, haven't you heard of AWS? They have these services. So why do you even bother? Out of that, world has really evolved and developed. So people actually understand the differences of approaches to cloud, the certain requirements, regionalities, and all that stuff. So Julien will give a little bit more, background on what we do. Today we are some 450 people, globally distributed, 73 nationalities in that group, so really diverse group in Helsinki, Berlin, Paris, Singapore, Sydney. We're just opening now in Tokyo, Toronto, and so forth. So again, we really try to build a global platform for what we do. Next. So again, it's really about the intersection of things within the public cloud with open source, and then of course being able to offer the managed capability, fully managed capability on top of that. Again, well, Julien will go into really detail of how things work, but again, this is a really sort of product fit into the market, and this is really what we're doing together with Exoscale, being able to have a fully pledged database as a service capability that really fulfills the compliance and location requirement, being able to have a sovereign European cloud capability. So with that, I'll let Julien talk about the real stuff, and I'll go away. Thank you.
Hi. Nice to meet you all. That's my first presentation, so it will be something new for me and new for you, I hope. So I will try to just talk about DBaaS, but as a generic talk. Not DBaaS the way that Aiven does DBaaS, but DBaaS in general. So the talk is not about Aiven, like it's not specific to Aiven. So I'm Julien Bayle. I'm classic career. I was architect, I was CTO. I've created 3 companies, and 2 failed. 1 is a success. And I'm partner solution architect right now in Aiven. So I work in the partner team with Ari and with Exoscale as a partners, and with all the partners for the company, which is Aiven. So the agenda is looking like, why using DBaaS? Then how can you select a good provider for you? Because it could be the provider of you are thinking about using, like you have Exoscale, so you want Exoscale as a provider, but perhaps it cannot solve all your challenges. So the idea is really understanding how can I select a provider. Then some best practices, but it's more open to question on this layer. So the benefits. I will try to make this a story. So here is a CEO and a CTO. It's a classical company. So they're starting, and the CEO has a new idea. So he can say, okay, let's create a website. We will sell all clauses. That's good stuff. We can make a lot of money from this. So the CTO say, yes, that's an MVP. Let's use PHP MySQL. So that's quite simple. So the CTO is an engineer, and it seems that's a simple MVP. He did not believe of that story. So I said, let's do something simple. I will just use like some VM, and I will just install the database using the package that are available on the VM. So I won't do something complex. So the problem is like you have two steps. The first is the setup of the database, and the reality is like if you use DBaaS, or if you use like some command lines to install, for example, MySQL, yes, it's minute. So both cases, just 1 minute. But on one side, with DBaaS, you have a production-ready, high available cluster with like all the security and everything which is working. On the other side, yes, you have the database, but that's all you have. There is no backups, there is nothing. It's not highly available, and you have to prove everything. So on the other part, you have the maintenance. So I would say, like, quite easy. It's like, you do it yourself, you take the risk. So because there is a lot of risk, you have to test and validate everything. So that's a process. You do it by yourself, you do it with an ISP, but you take the risks. And the risks are for your business. And that will be the second part of my presentation, is about like the risk and how do you select a database provider, understanding your risks. With DBaaS, it's like classical offer. Since the beginning, you have everything. So the full life cycle. You can scale, you can do everything, just one click. Everything is ready. Because you can be like a small user, you will have the same operation available for you as a big company with big clusters. So you can scale from something small to something big, and everything is ready for that. You have nothing to do. So the idea is like, in Aiven, we use some TCO calculator. So if I use this TCO calculator for some classical production-grade high availability cluster, we just try to understand how many hours. So we check this with the customers, and the numbers are here. A real setup with the security, the IPsec tunnels, everything for like do secure stuff, and something which is like really robust, and you have point-in-time restoration for your data and whatever you want. It's like not thousands, but hundreds and thousands times more time. So that's about like 500 hours. The same for maintenance. You have the OS maintenance, the patch you should apply, everything. You need to check security of all the components, all the dependency and everything, and that takes a lot of time. So you would say, okay, but that's for one database. But I don't have one database, I have many databases, so that's not the same. So for example, some customers, they have hundreds of databases. So you would say that's the average, so that's 5 hours against minute, and I control everything. But that's not true, because we have done a study with like 5 customers who are like medium to big size, and we ask them to really understand how much time do they win, and they will agility. So agility is really something that means some money. That means time to market is better. It's like 80% reduction of time to create a new database, or to create a test database, or to fork some database for test. It's like, really, it's better. It's like 1 day instead of 1 week, but it could be like 1 week instead of 1 month. So 5 times less is really impressive. The same for the staff time. They really win the staff time on the setup and the maintenance. So for them, there is no way. DBaaS is the way to go. There is no reason. So you have one database, it's easy to understand, but you have plenty of database, that's the same thing. So let's come back to the story. 3 months later. So the CEO, it's classical. It's like, time to market, my MVP, where is it? And the CTO say, we have done some test of scaling, and that's not good. It doesn't scale well. So we will just migrate to Kubernetes. That's should be the answer to our questions, to scale well, to have auto scaling for the workloads. And then we will use some open search and Redis in place in that MySQL to just improve the whole product performance. But the problem is like classical. You started doing it by yourself, so you will add the new product by yourself. And every new database is different. You have to learn everything again. So that's new things you have to learn from your team, and that new techniques to manage. You cannot back up the same way, you cannot restore the same way, you cannot do the high availability the same way. Everything is new for you. So that's quite huge. So people would say, okay, but that's not true, because they are using Kubernetes there. There are good operators to manage some database over Kubernetes. And I would say, why not? But let's see. What's the comparison? Let's take the best database operator against a classical DBaaS service. So first, what I want to state here is like, the complexity of Kubernetes alone, it's 600,000 lines of code. Okay, that's the core of Kubernetes. That's the numbers for Aiven. So Aiven is just an operator. So that's like Kubernetes. It just orchestrates and applies on. It's a control plane. Like the DBaaS provider, it does a control plane to control that everything is OK. The same demonstration or Argo CD. Just check that everything is fine. Database is OK, the size is OK, everything is OK. And then if it is not OK, just apply and restore the situation. So one node is off, then you create a new node, you remigrate the data, and it gets back to the normal state. But it is database focused. So that's not the same. And the problem with Kubernetes is like a lot of stuff you need for data, for stateful, and to have your data like really in security, and to be resilient, you need a lot of stuff above Kubernetes to have a good service. When you use DBaaS, that's just, they do it well. It is easy to understand, but what you have to understand here is like a DBaaS provider is not just some scripting over a database, over a service. That's really a product. And here is like for Kubernetes. In Aiven, we have double the size of code right here. So that's really a big project. That's not something small. This is not just scripts. Then setup and maintenance, you understand that when you use Kubernetes and you want something which is really supported, then you need to have multiple choices because there is multiple operator, they get multiple people that can support it. We have seen there is multiple companies that help you use Kubernetes. So that's a lot of choices. That's overwhelming. It could be overwhelming. DBaaS, like when you use Exascale at the end, you have Exascale, you have the Debuff provider, and it provides you different database. One provider, one procurement for all. And it's all compatible with Kubernetes. That's just no effort. Then you have compliance, security, and backup. OK, use an operator. But then what? Is this secure? Is this compliant? Who tests it? Who make all the operators work together? So that's not that easy. If you use DBaaS, it's by design. You want this compliance, your provider has it or doesn't have it. That's all. You just check the list. If it is on the list, that's OK. If it is not, perhaps you need to find out another one. But right, it's by design. So let's get back to the story. 12 months later, and we have the classical one. It works. It really works. That's not no more an MVP. That's a real product. Then the product is what? They want more feature, but they cannot have more feature because the teams is overwhelmed by the scaling problem. So they do automation, they do reliability. And the first reflex, because they have done everything by themselves, even using Kubernetes, it's like, we need some hops. More hops to get the team back to the job, just working on the MVP, working on the product, adding some features. So that's classical. It seems classical, but I would say this story is a classical story. I think perhaps some of us have just lived this story. I have lived it. Then Steve Jobs say something really simple. He say, right, focusing is about saying no. You just say no to something. That's the way to focus. You have to say no. So the answer is yes. Say no to managing your database. So what you have to do is like, it's a simple opinion. That's my opinion, but you don't need database. You need first a database provider since day zero of your project. Not when, I need it perhaps later. No, you don't need later on. You need it now, right now, the first day of the MVP. Like the first day, like day zero. That's already a choice made. You will use DBaaS provider. It's mature. It's no more like some experiments of some provider. Exascale is not experimenting using a DBaaS service. It's mature. It works. There is thousands of clients. Exascale is about 100,000 nodes managed. So that's not small. That's mature. And all the big DBaaS providers, they are mature. And that's never too late. So the CEO said, he went to a conference, Acceler8 in Zurich, and he said, oh, let's use DBaaS. And the CTO said, yeah, I know. That's my mistake. But the idea of the CTO is classical. He say, I didn't believe in the project. I didn't believe I will feel that I cannot handle it. Because he didn't imagine a real success. And I think most of us, we do not just believe in the success. So just believe in the success because DBaaS helps your success and supports your success. Then some people said, but DBaaS is expensive. So I prove you the point on agility. I didn't prove you the point about money. So I think most of us say, okay, DBaaS, okay, but it's expensive. Look at the price. If I just pay the VM, it's better. It's like 10 times less or something like this. Yeah, but if you create like a full TCO, the total cost of ownership, that's not the case. This is numbers from our customers. This is not like false numbers. This is realistic numbers. This is what real customers have like lived. It's like it's a 5-month payback. 5-month payback period. So you are not using DBaaS. You migrate to DBaaS. In 5 months, that's paid. The migration, everything is paid. And that's OK. And then it's better. The return of interest is good. So that's lead me to the next chapter. How do you select your DBaaS provider? So I will introduce 2 new concepts, which are really important for me. And when I listen to the customers as an architect, I want the answer to these questions. And most of the people don't have it. They're saying, that's technical. So the first question is named recovery point objective. So they say, oh, that's not for me. That's technical. Don't ask me anything. So the problem is like, that's not technical at all. That's business problem. That's a business question. So the CEO and all the people for business, they should answer to this simple question. In the worst scenario, how much data are you ready to lose? And that's the question. How much? Nothing? Or 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour, 1 day? How much are you ready to lose? Because the reality of the price of DBaaS, it depends on this answer. The price is quite different if you want to lose 0 or you accept to lose 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes. The price is radically different. Even your DBaaS provider is different. So to be clear, the answer is architecture. So if you want to go to 0, you have complex architecture. If you accept to go like to 1 day, then you have really simple architecture. You can do it yourself even. Because 1 day, you just take the backup and you put the backup back, and if you do not have a lot of data, that's OK. You recover. You have lost 1 day, but that's easy. If you want to go to 0, then you should accept that one region, one full data center could fail. And then what? The backup is, you don't have any backup, nothing. So how do you do that? So that's more complex. And then the DBaaS provider, it provides this service for you. Then we have recovery time objective. That's the other business question. It's like, how much time do you accept the database or your service is down? 0 minutes or 15 minutes? 1 hour? Once again, that's the business question. And then the price of the DBaaS provider change a lot because, once again, that's an architectural problem. The lower, the more complex. So here, if you want 0, you need high available multi-region cluster with even auto-retry system or in-sync write, multi-region in-sync write. That's not a lot of provider can provide this right now. So that's very expensive. And the reality is like everyone was 0 and 0. I want no downtime, and I want to lose nothing. Right, that's clear. But that's the most expensive. And you don't want this in reality. Because your service is for banks, that's OK, they can pay. But if your service here is like just a website that sells old clothes, perhaps it's too much. You will have like a very expensive service. So you need to accept this. You need to accept that you have to change. Like you accept to lose some data, or you accept that you will have some downtimes. And how much minute do you accept? And that's really important to understand this. Because your DBaaS provider, he cannot provide everything for you. He has like a range. His offering, his architecture, is an answer to some of these answers, not all. The problem right now with the customers is that they don't have the answer to these questions. So they go to the SLA. Say, what's your SLA? But what's the SLA? Have you read an SLA that speaks about losing data? No. How much do they pay you if they lose 1 minute of your data? That's not in the SLA. But the reality is like, if you go to your provider with RPO and RTO and you are clear about this, it's clear for you, you have the reason, the business reason behind, then you can select the good one, which is the good for you. And then they can say, I can't do it. I can do 0. This provider cannot do 0. So he must say, I can provide you 2 minutes, but I cannot provide you 0. 2 minutes is OK for you? Not OK. If it's not OK for you, that's another DBaaS provider. SLA, what's SLA? Everybody is speaking about SLA. SLA is warranty assurance. If I don't do my job, I pay you back. And how much do I pay you? Like classical SLA, 10x, 30x. So like, it's like, I lost 5 minutes, I paid you 10 times more, so 15 minutes of the time. So you have a check, like 100 euros, and you have lost like your big customer. That's SLA. So just to be clear, SLA is good. Now I will say the good point of SLA. Like a provider, you don't want to do checks, because the accountant time is money too. And like the image is not good. So the SLA that provide your provider is nearly the real SLA, because it doesn't want to pay checks even. But for you, you have to understand that this SLA is not your SLA. That's the average SLA. So it's not like certitude. It's not something sure. So SLA is good, because without it, there is no real service, there is no quality of service, there is nothing. But that's not the real business question you have to ask yourself. Then there is the classic one. You have to understand the compliance and regulatory rules that apply to your business. And do not imagine big ones, because you want to have like a lot of certification you don't need. Because then, once again, the price is not the same, and the DBaaS provider is not the same. Then let's talk about open source. So right now, open source is like, it's OK. We all understand that open source provide quality software. That's not true for all the open source database, but like the major one, we all agree that the quality is here. So nowadays, like, it's major. But the problem is not open source. It's which flavor does your DBaaS provider provides you. So first, there is the vanilla open source. It's like vanilla is the classic flavor. So they provide you the vanilla. It means like you do apt-get install on your node MySQL, or you go to your DBaaS provider, you want MySQL, same product, no difference. That's vanilla. Not customized, not the service, not the plugins, nothing. Everything is vanilla. Then you have, I created something which is chocolate flavor. It's like somebody just create a fork, a copy. It's still open source. Right now, it's on internet. It's still open source. But the reality behind this fork is most of the time, it's customized. Because if it is not customized, why not using vanilla for him? And then there is a risk of divergence. Because really, over the time, it can diverge. That's first. And second risk is like one company controls this fork. It's like it owns the fork. And he wants to do something, he say, I don't want this from the vanilla, he don't take it. He don't want to put back, he don't take it. He want to go in this direction, he can. For the moment, you have like people that provide forked. So in the fork, they solve the challenges, they solve bugs. And they say, our version is better than the vanilla version. So you go to this version, and you enable these features that doesn't work in the vanilla version. Then you think you cannot go back to the vanilla version, because your software won't work. So that's classical. For example, in Cassandra, the materialized view, it doesn't work. But some provider has done from fork, and it works. So just be sure about what you're doing. Then some of them do not release the code, because the open source license, you can take Kafka, you provide Kafka as a database as a service, you say that's a modified version, and you do not say anything about it. What's modified? How can you check? How can you control? And the idea behind is like, how can you control it? How much time are you ready to put to just understand what's the difference? Then you have false open source. I would say false open source, that's an opinion, but yeah. There is like approved by the open source initiative standard, like the license is really open source. The idea behind is like, there is no control. No company controls the software. So for example, when I speak Kafka, people say, Confluent. No. Kafka is in the Apache Foundation. It's not controlled by Confluent. It's a real open source project. There is many contributors. No one controls the future of Kafka. So it's like there is no real company behind. So the companies that started the project, they want to, but if they do real open source, then you are like, you can use it like you've been secure. On the other side, you have other licenses, like server-side public license. For example, MongoDB or Elastic, the real Elasticsearch, not the OpenSearch, which is open source. This is control. One company controls everything. So MongoDB, it's open source, but it's controlled by MongoDB. And once again, they changed the license so that nobody can provide DBaaS services. So if you find MongoDB and you say, OK, MongoDB is here and here in, there is many providers, that's wrong. Because this is the same provider behind. This is MongoDB behind. So if the price just rises here, it will rise everywhere. You cannot leave them. That's the same for Elastic right now. So my idea is yes, if they do forks, if there is proprietary code, if there is, because there is something better. But my graph wants to show you that the vendor lock-in will be high, and the innovation will be small. So the only question you have to ask yourself is are you ready to completely, because that's completely lose your business power, the business power of quitting, the business moving away, just for this feature? Could be fun. But how much does it really mean for you? So just think to yourself, how many features are you using? How much money for you? And then the price of the stuff. And you will see that perhaps some of the time, most of the time, your return of interest of building this feature yourself with a provider, finding an add-on which is really open source, could be better for your business. So let's get back. The CTO say, hey, you want DBaaS, so what are your requirements? But the CEO went with us at the conference, and he said, yeah, that's my cha-cha-cha. And then imagine a CTO with this answer. That's only business answer. The reality is any CEO, if they understand what we are talking about, he can provide everything. So that's classical questions. Here is just a story, some example. But the idea behind is that's business decision. Some best practices. So first, scale before your database is overloaded, because even the best DBaaS provider, when you use all the CPU, for example, you click scale, that's game over. That's too late. So don't imagine that, OK, DBaaS is stopping over-provisioning. But then don't go to the idea of, I will use 100% of my machine, and then I will scale, because that's failure for you. You will scale, but it won't scale. And then you will call the support, and they will explain you, yeah, but we send you 2 mails that you should scale. But no, that's too late. So scale soon. Test it, just understand what scaling means, but about 70% of the usage of your machine, you should think about scaling. That's now you should scale, really. Because if you are rising 10% a month, so don't wait 80 or 90%. Scale at about 70 plus. Then understand scaling in your app. You can see that I can scale, double scale. OK, double scale. So you understand double performance. So I will click scale, and then I can have 2 times more customer, or that's cool. It's 2 times the price, 2 times more customers, so that's cool. But that's not true. Not true at all. You can click scale, double the price, same performance. Why? Some performance are limited by your disk I/O. So you double the size with the same disk, all right, same performance, for example. So that's not true. In some cases, if the problem is, for example, the disk I/O, don't scale the CPU and the memory. Scale the disk. Then you have more I/O. And then it scales without clicking scale, just add disk. So my idea behind is how can we, what's the best practice with scaling? It's you need to understand how do you software scale. So there is simple stuff. It's called session capture and replay. So how does it work? You have your users, they use your database, OK? So there is session logs, all the queries they have done. So we say enter, select, write, read, select, create a transaction, and you have your metrics and your backup. You use your backup, and you create a fork database, scaled, so 2 times the scale, OK? Then you use some session replay system with 2 times, the speed is 2 times, so 2 times the speed. And then you look to the metrics, and you compare to the other metrics. And do you have really 2 times more? And then you will understand what's the true nature of your software. So my advice here is don't wait 70% to do this. When you are about 50 or 40% of usage of your machine, just scale this way. Try, test if it is scaling the way it scales, understand a little bit of the technical stuff behind, And if you are the CEO and not the CTO, then ask your team to do it. You say, we can scale. Yes, but have you tested it? What I can see from Aiven is like, my customers that don't scale when they should scale, then they do not test it before. So they're thinking about, yeah, I click scale, I got 2 times more. No, that's not true. Because the true nature of the steps, it's like it could be IO bound, it could be CPU bound, it could be memory bound, or, and that's the problem, it could be just linked to a database parameter. So you scale, but this parameter doesn't change, and then the limitation for you is still the same. And you can scale how much you want. It won't change. That's our limit. Because you need to have better parameters for the database, for your app. And that's a DBA job. But your provider is not a DBA. It scales the resources. Okay? It just scales the resources. But if you scale the resources and that's not the good stuff for you, won't work. Okay? Then perhaps, are you using a cache? Because sometimes you just use a cache. You put a Redis, some cache, and then you have like 100x performance for like something which is not very costly. Because double the price, then you can use a cache for the same price. And sometimes it's better. So just understand what scaling means. You can scale, but that's not the only way to scale. Then I've got my last advice, and then I will be pleased to answer any question, is the exit strategy. The exit strategy, everybody speak about it. You say, oh, yeah, exit strategy, we could have it. I was in Capgemini, and my customers, they always ask me something, like, you can do whatever you can, but prove me I can install it somewhere else. I can move. Prove me it. So you can do anything. If you prove me, I can leave. So that's the exit strategy. If you think your system, think it the way, like, can I find 2 providers, and can I migrate from A to B? And the idea is like, understand what you're dependent on. The more you use something, the more you're dependent. But the true nature of the job using a DBaaS provider is like, there is your requirements. How many DBaaS providers provide your requirements? OK, 10. OK, then database interface. I'm using vanilla open source, version 14 of this service. I use these and these and these plugins. I have these specific parameters for my service. How many database providers are compatible with this? OK, 4 now. Then you use the database lifecycle interface. I'm using Terraform from all of them, which are compatible with Terraform, so that I don't do everything else again. Then it's 2. So that's not good. Then what's the price for getting my data out? Because I've got 100 terabytes of data. And then this operator is just like, it's the most expensive one. Then this helps you to select the operator, just the A, the primary operator, and just understand that perhaps one day, because all the operators in the history, some of them just failed. For any reason, but they failed. And the reason behind is like, you do not have good service, or the price rise, or anything, but you have a reason to go away. So really be ready, because your business depends on it. Thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much, Julien, and Ari as well. So no break yet. So are there questions to both of them, to Aiven? That's such an interesting service. Now it's the moment you can talk personally to the CTO. So no, so maybe I will have a question for you. So not the same than before. Which database will we see on Aiven next, and which we will never see on Aiven?
Right now, the roadmap for Aiven is like, we wanted to have a database for every kind of service. So time series, analytics, like data in motion, and data like classical OLTP and OLEP. So we wanted to have everything. So right now, like, we have one answer, which is vanilla open source, real good stuff for all the meaning. So we are like a complete data platform. We have used Kafka for like in motion. We have the full Kafka ecosystem, and we have all the services. So the roadmap is not new services, is to integrate with the OEM more, so more integration. So really, for example, when we work with Exascale, how can we really like connect the most easy way for all the customers so that they use DBaaS services and it's well integrated with the whole ecosystem of every partner or every big customer. So we are more improving the ecosystem or around all service. But there is no roadmap of new services right now.
Thank you for the question. So as you are very successful with a database as a service, do you have other plans for, plans for other services as a service? I mean, you're now in data, maybe what's next?
I would say what we are trying to offer is really, we do cloud ops as a platform. So the nature of the business of Aiven is as I think you understood from the presentation, we do vanilla open source only, and the product is cloud ops. So the idea behind is we will improve the cloud ops to make them simple, and we have some stuff which is custom. So for some customers, we do custom stuff. So for banks or some, which has very specific requirements. So the idea is now to offer this custom stuff to everybody back, in the basic offer. So everything we have done which is custom, we want to platformize it so that everybody can just have the maximum security for a bank, but you can subscribe to it. Right now you can't. It's you take a sales and something, but you don't have an API for this kind of high-level architecture.
Okay. Good. So still no question here.
So thank you for your talk. Just a quick question about location. We are used to kind of having the database in the same data center as the application itself is running. Do you have any experience if basically there's no application service by the DBaaS provider, that there's also that you need to take that into account, or is that in the nowadays with the bandwidth that we have not really a factor?
Aiven has chosen some things. We have some partnership with many providers. So right now we cover, I think, a little bit more than 100 data center or region of the world over multi-cloud and different providers. But we have, most of the time, the same question. It's I want Aiven on this, and it's not yet ready, and I cannot have it. How can we do it? I think we are working on it to do it through not Kubernetes right now, but we want to use in some provider right now, you can use Kubernetes and you can just use the VM API. So you do not want a node, you want a full node for you. So you want the full VM for you. So we are working on, if you have such API, we will offer Aiven service for any provider. But that's not right now possible, and that's in the roadmap. But we are thinking about how can we do it. So right now we are starting to think about with Anthos. So that's one thing that you can just manage all the clusters, your Kubernetes clusters using Anthos. So that's not a classical one, but people can manage the service in exascale using Anthos and having a cluster in every provider. And then we will be able to provide Aiven services using the API, for example, of Anthos. But this is not a generic answer. So we will try to have a solution which is more generic, and Anthos will be only one implementation of this generic. But right now, it's not yet ready. Okay. And there is a reason. The reason is easy. It's the market is in cloud providers or good providers who really are mature to offer something like a cloud-like. When I mean cloud-like, it's everybody cloud-like, but really you don't care about it. So our problem with this kind of stuff you are thinking about is when you have 30 nodes cluster, and for example, you want to scale to 60 nodes. What we do is we call the API and we ask for 60 VM. And the problem is what happens if this provider cannot handle this? And with small provider, for example, we cannot go, because when you request 60 VM, it doesn't work. And the problem is the way we operate the updates, when you have a 30-node cluster and we just do security patch, we create a new cluster because we use blue-green. So to apply a patch, we need 30 VM like this. So the problem for us is this limitation. So we only work with provider like acceler8 that really can handle this kind of request. So that's a technical limitation. So I don't know what you are thinking about, the size of your provider on-premise or something like that. the idea is like there is some requirements to make it works like really seamlessly for you.
Next question. Arno from Vision.
As far as understood, currently the exascale database as a service powered by Aiven is one region at a time only, right?
It depends. Right now, the current implementation, it is, but I think over this year, I hope, we have the time in both sides to provide your multi-region deployments.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But what we are doing is like, it's one region, but we use the anti-affinity. So we make it sure that your different nodes, this is not in the same hypervisor. So this is not like complete security if everything burns. But we try to put like the different nodes away from each other. But in the future, the idea would like really to be able to have some different topologies.
Also, depending on the service, for example, for
Yeah.
Postgres, you can already spin up one service in one zone and one service in another zone, and the second service can be a replica. So acts as a disaster recovery solution. Cool. I have one quick question, honest question myself. Ari, Julien, thank you for being here. I mean, you talk about scale a little bit and the use case about a new project, about the CTO, the developer. I very often hear about database as a service. Okay, it's cool because it's fast. I can use it in minutes. So it's really good for my development project. But I think that's maybe a misconception. Can you guys give us some, I mean, not names, but just numbers to grasp the size of the customers you're dealing with in terms of, I mean, you talked about 30 nodes, but.
I think, you want to take it? Okay. So I think what's great with like mature DBaaS provider is like we work with the small ones, that's just a WordPress. To the big companies, like I can name customers, Harry? Yeah, for example, Decathlon or like we do all the database for them. So what they are doing is like they create something over us and they create a platform. So if you are a big one, every time it's the same. You make us disappear behind your own API for your own developers. So the DBaaS provider API is invisible for the provider. So the big ones, they do like this. They make even exascale disappear. So they say, I want a VM, they have an endpoint, and they have a VM. They want a DBaaS, they have an endpoint. But that's not our endpoint. So that's the biggest one. So for this kind of customers, I think we have about like until 1,000 services in total. And then the small one is just, it could be a simple MySQL. So we operate everything from the small to the biggest one. Is that the answer you?
Yeah, but how large is the biggest cluster, for example? Because I mean, with exascale, we stopped the offering, at least on the price sheet. There's like 15, 30 nodes max, but
so it
it
depends on the service. I think for PostgreSQL, for example, it's vertical, but the idea is like if you want to scale, so that's the question, it's like how far your provider can scale to. Because like the largest, I would say hypervisor, if you take all the resources for you, this is one limitation, and the reality is like this is different. So what we are doing is like for some customers, we work with the partner like you, and we create for them like an hypervisor for him. So if he wants something very specific, then we can create something specific. So there is the plans which are official, and then for any like specific demand, we can work to have something custom. So the limits depends. There is like no real limits because we do custom until the end. But that's custom plan. That's just what I can say. It's like what is the basic offer is proven. So if you use all the plans, Aiven has proven it. We have a customer with each plan. So everything is like, you won't be the first one to click on this plan. But if you want to go over, for example, I don't know, 100 Kafka nodes, like a big cluster, I think in Decathlon, the biggest is around 90, I would say. So 90 nodes, I think it's the biggest one. But we have it, but you cannot find it in the plans. So we do custom. So for the big companies, yeah, that's custom plan. And if you have any specific challenge, then you can go to the provider and we create a custom plan for you. even with Exascale. There is no, it's not specific to Aiven. We do it with all the partners.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. Thanks a lot for the question. So also from a sales perspective, so we are really, we really like to have you in our services. So because it's a huge chance, opportunity for us as well, also to sell your services. And thanks a lot for having me.